Hey everyone, and thank you for listening to Facilities in Focus. My name is Mackenna Moralez, and I am the Associate Editor of FacilitiesNet and your host of this very podcast. Today I am joined by a real life Ron Swanson. I hope you get the reference, but I am joined by Michael Kashuba, the Director of Parks and Recreation for the City of Amarillo. Michael had been with the city for the past 6.5 years. It has been a part of strategic plans that help improve efficiency, reduce taxpayer subsidies, and has addressed numerous customer service concerns. Thank you so much for joining me today, Michael. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you.
Great. So, it is to my understanding that your team recently was awarded some robotic mowers. Can you please explain a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I'll go back and give kind of a little bit of history as to kind of why we even started looking at robotics. During COVID, one of the things that we saw as a department was our staffing was slashed in half. And a hiring freeze was put in place, like I'm sure a lot of other organizations and a lot of other cities. Um, and I think the challenge was really coming out of COVID is how do you re-engage the workforce? How do you rehire employees? And so we would looked at hiring full-time employees back. We'd looked at hiring part-time employees. We'd looked at hiring seasonal employees. We'd looked at using temp agencies, and we just couldn't get people to come back after COVID. And so we had this significant shortage in staffing. And one of the things we started looking at was contracts. But the other thing was things like robotics that could help with the efficiencies. And so, kind of out of COVID, we started looking and we found a manufacturer that provided these autonomous mowers. And so we wanted to just start small. We had a facility that we had actually just fenced off, big open multi-purpose field. And so it was very simple. It didn't have a whole lot of complicated issues with fencing and other things. And so it was the perfect test case for us. And so we were able to buy one larger mower and three smaller mowers and put those out at that site and have really been happy with kind of the success of those autonomous mowers. I mean, it's something that has really been a force multiplier for us. We're not looking at reducing jobs. We're looking at ways that we can get our staff to go do the jobs that really they want to do, and allow the autonomous mowers to go out there and kind of help them to do that. So.
Right. I know this is kind of a silly question, but do they all run at the same time?
They can, yes. So we've got each of them there, and the way we refer to them is they're basically like a Roomba. So they each have their own little docking station. You kind of assign them their own little area, and then they come back, charge, and then they go back out and continue to the work. So I think that's one of the great things that we've seen is they can run nonstop. Once they go charge, they go back out, and then they come back in and charge. And so, whereas with regular employees, obviously you've got 8 to 5 or 7 to 4, and they're gone
Right.
for the day. But these mowers can run pretty much nonstop. And so a lot of times when we're in season, we'll run them in the evening hours and early morning, and they can go out there and mow. And then when we've got activities, they go park themselves. So you can schedule them to go out around your activities. And that's been really, really helpful for us.
What has the maintenance looked like for these robots, I guess,
It,
for the
it's yeah,
mowers?
I mean it's been very minimal. I mean, there's been a few issues where we've had some communications issues between the base station and the robot. The robots that we use or the mowers that we use actually have they don't have your traditional mower blade. They actually are using almost little razor blades. So you have to
Okay.
go change those out. But that's really the extent of the maintenance that we've had is going out, changing out those razor blades, and then allowing it to get back out to work. So very, very minimal. I think the one thing, and most manufacturers will caution you up front, is when you start implementing week 1 and 2, those mowers are going to find your low spots. They're going to find the trip hazards. They're going to find all of those things. So, the first couple weeks, it's doing some grading and kind of leveling those spots out, and then after that, they pretty much just self-run. So,
Right. They're just like a Roomba. They're getting a feel for the land.
That's exactly right. So they go out there and they'll find those little issues that maybe you didn't even know. And so, it helps you, especially on an athletic field where you can go out and smooth those back out. Because if the mowers are going to find it, so are participants.
Right. That's so interesting that you mentioned the trip hazards of mowing or just grounds in general. As a clumsy person, I feel like
Yeah,
I always fall or
yeah,
always stumble upon
yeah,
things. And so just having like the awareness ahead of time, I can see how beneficial that would be for people.
yeah. Yeah, it's the little low spots, and it's whether it's a valve box or things like that. It will find those little low spots and it'll communicate, hey, there's something going on over here, and then staff can go out there and they can either top dress if there's a low spot, or if it's an irrigation box, addressing and adjusting those to the right height. So again, the first week or two, there's a little bit of hiccups just as the mowers get used to the site and as staff gets used to kind of how they operate. But again, once they get going, they've been very, very effective for us.
How do you get that information? Is something all that data, is it stored somewhere?
No, so it's the manufacturer we use actually has an app and it will send real-time updates. You can pull up your phone anytime and you can see, what percentage battery is left, how much acres it's covered, how much of the mowing space it still has to do that day. It'll tell you if there's somebody that's touched the mower, if it's run into any kind of obstacles. It'll actually send you real-time alerts. So that way staff can go out there, address it, get it going back, and doing what it's supposed to be doing.
That's so interesting. Um, for the storing it, and you mentioned docking it, it doesn't get docked at the field, right?
Yes, it does. Yeah.
Oh, it
So we
does?
actually, so we in all at the location we started with, we had kind of our main athletic area, so we fenced that off. But then we also had a little storage yard. So we actually did a cutout in the fence between the athletic area and the storage yard that was a foot or two tall. And those mowers will go from the athletic field into the storage area and park themselves. The area that we actually created are literally like little dog houses. They have a little roof, they have little walls, and then they have like the room charging station where they just pull in, park. That way they're kind of out of the weather, and then they just go back out to the field. So they're technically not in the athletic area; they're in a storage yard, but they go back and forth on their own.
I'm sure you're like, oh, this girl's such an idiot because I was just like picturing them out in the wild, just like just stored. So I was like, how do no one steal them? I just didn't.
Yeah.
I couldn't compute
No,
it.
and that's something we actually thought about. Are generally open spaces where you get a lot of different users, a lot of vandalism and things like that. So that's why we kind of started with a location that was fenced. And I would recommend for a lot of facilities operators that you start something that you can control, a control site. Um, Again, we're looking at expanding our fleet, but we're going to be doing that also in fenced areas just to make sure that we've got some controls on it. All of these mowers do have alarms on them and they have GPS tracking. So if somebody tries to touch them, first of all, you'll get a notification on your phone. Second of all, it makes a awful noise. And if for some reason they do get it in a vehicle, it has GPS tracking and they basically become basically a large paperweight. So at
Oh,
some point, it's easy to find them. They can track them. And again, they make an awful, awful noise. So,
yeah. So you hear that, thieves? Don't even
yep,
try. That also just seems
yep,
like a lot of work.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's not easy, and I would say again, there's good security features on there that really help to ensure that those units stay where they're supposed to be. And again, you get real-time alerts. So if something is going wrong, we've even had it where there was a user group that was out there that we didn't know was out on the fields that day, and so
Hmm.
somebody was trying to turn the mowers off, and it started blowing up our phones with all these alerts. And so it allows us to go out there and address kind of the issue right then as well. And so there's a lot of really good security features as well.
That's so cool because you just never think about
Yeah.
stuff like that, or at least I personally wouldn't, at least. How do robotic solutions improve efficiency compared to traditional labor methods?
I think they have been extremely helpful for us. And I think it's things that you don't think about. Most organizations have been challenged over the years where they keep saying do more with less, do more with less, do more with less. Well, all that does is stretch your staff extremely thin. And
Right.
so one of the things that we've been able to do with this is use the autonomous mowers to go do tasks that take a long period of time and allows us to reassign our staff to higher priorities. So we look at it as a force multiplier. We look at it as something that actually supports staff and the ability of our department to go out and do more work. So, I think from a force multiplier, it's a great thing. I think one of the other things is it allows us to work. I kind of touched on it briefly. Is those mowers can mow all night long. And so we're
Hmm.
not relying on a workforce that comes in from 8 to 5 or 7 to 4, whatever your work schedule is. They can run all night long and they don't get tired. You don't have to deal with the HR issues. And so it's been very beneficial for us to just, set those schedules and allow them to go out and do those tasks that can be repeated over and over.
Right.
This isn't for every task. These are things that I think we look at the ones that could be repeated over and over that takes a big chunk of time off of staff hands and allows them to do other things. So and the other good thing is because of the lightweight nature of these mowers, typically after you irrigate, you have to kind of stay off of fields for a little while so you don't put tire tracks and things like that. Because these mowers are so light, as soon as the irrigation runs, those mowers are back to work. So it allows for a much bigger window also for that mowing to occur.
How big is your team?
So our department, our park maintenance team, our department as a whole has 11 different divisions, everything from the pools to the zoo and everything in between. Our park maintenance team used to be over 100 employees. We're down to 49. So
Ooh.
again, a lot of that was after COVID. We were contracting some of those tasks out. And then obviously with some of our efficiencies through these autonomous mowers, it's really helped the staff that we do have.
Yeah. So I know that grounds or just facilities in general tends to be an older generation that is working, not you. For our listeners, Michael looks very young. Um, how did you get people on board with the robotics? Were they kind of afraid at first?
Yeah, I think with any kind of change, I think nobody quite knows what to expect. And so I think that's where kind of me and my assistant director kind of took the lead on this and went out and really did a lot of the hands-on just to because we didn't know what we were getting into either. And so we kind of started the charge as kind of initiators. And I think once people started to see the improvement in the turf quality, the amount of work that it reduced off of their plate, I think we got a lot of buy-in. So we obviously we did one site to begin with. We just had council approval to buy more units. So we're actually going to expand this into additional facilities. And I guess I should touch on just briefly. So our department actually contracted out a lot of our landscape maintenance. The things that we've kept in our operations are our athletic fields. We wanted to make sure that they were providing a higher level of service than a general park maintenance. So we actually kept the athletic fields in-house. And so that's where those autonomous mowers are going. So we've got right now 5 full-size soccer fields that are fenced off that are being mowed by these autonomous mowers. And we're about to add 8 additional fields into the maintenance through this autonomous mower program.
Oh, wow. I know that you said that the mowers can run all day and night, but how often do you actually run them?
We love running them all the time. I mean, we will block them out during the day, like when we have activities. But one of the things that we see is with turf maintenance, you want to mow frequently because it makes that grass thicker. So, I think a lot of people like to get the grass really tall. But what happens is when you
Mhm.
do that, it actually makes for a weaker root system and weaker spreading patterns. So what we actually prefer is for it to mow just a tiny little bit off the top of the grass so that it actually helps encourage lateral growth, which then makes it better for athletic users. It provides a more durable surface for when we are out there playing soccer and things like that. So we actually want it mowing all the time if we can.
Right. Is there a preferred grass length?
It just depends, I think, on the users. Obviously, if you're in a general park setting, 2, 3 inches is great. If you're talking golf course, depending on which part of the golf course, you could be, half inch, quarter inch. Athletic fields, it kind of depends on your user groups. We've got some that want it a little bit longer. We've got some that want it a little bit shorter. And so it also allows us to customize what those user groups want. One of
Mm.
the cool features of the robots we have is we can actually change the height on the fly. So we can say we want to go from 1.5 inches to 1.25 inches. Well, those robots will go back, park themselves, adjust themselves, and then go back out and mow at the new height. So it allows you to adjust those heights if you need to do that without having to send somebody out to do that.
Well, that's very nice. And I'm sure that just saves so much time too, just being able I know there's such like this misconception about phones and people being on their
Yeah.
phones or their iPads
Yeah.
all the time, but there is a benefit to them. And it's something like that, like you don't have to go to this site because I don't know how big your city is, but it takes me like 20 minutes to get anywhere where
Yeah.
I live.
Yeah, our city is about 100 square miles. We've got 65 park sites or facilities that we manage, and so again, they're kind of scattered throughout the community. And so, if you can just almost set it and forget it, I mean, I hate to use that phrase, but you can focus on other tasks. So you can set those mowers to just go do their thing, and then that allows you to go focus on other facilities. And then if something pops up on your phone, obviously you can go check on it and make sure that it's doing what it's supposed to, and then go back to other assignments. So again, I think it's really something that, most people are a little bit terrified of technology and new things. But
Mhm.
after our staff has started to see this, I think they're more and more excited about the potential to not only add more sites, but also add more technology. So we've actually been looking at some new things that we might want to include in our arsenal in the future.
Mhm. I know this was kind of like a throwaway statement that you just said, but why do you not like the phrase "set it and forget it"?
Because I think it's the perception that it's out of sight, out of mind. But I think a lot of times we want to make sure that we're still maintaining things well, that we are paying attention to it, and we just don't want to kind of leave it over there to the side. So you still have to have some good oversight, making sure that things are done well. Um, but it allows you to again focus on those other things.
Right. Okay, that makes a lot more sense because I know that just trades work in general, they don't get the credit unless
Yeah.
something goes wrong.
Yep.
So, or get any spotlight unless something goes wrong. And I think people just tend to fall into that mindset that if people aren't paying attention, that means that you're doing a good job, and that's not always the truth.
Yeah, I think I'm thinking of it more from the standpoint of it's still important. You still have to pay attention to it. You can't just check that off and go completely ignore it and move on to something else. I think you still have to have those check-ins to make sure that, like with anything, that it's still doing what you want it to do. It doesn't mean you just can't visit that site ever. I mean, you have to go check to make sure that it is being maintained because there are glitches with technology. And so just making sure
Mhm.
that you do have eyes on the site as well.
Do you only allow certain people to have like the app on their phone, or does everybody have access?
No, we're very limited in who has access to it. We want to make sure that we don't have multiple hands in the pot because that's where we see a lot of mistakes being made. So we want to keep it
Mhm.
with 1 or 2 people. So I think when we talk about technology, so we've got the mowers, we've also got some field stripers that we do as well. And I think the biggest thing is making sure that you train them well, but that you also cross train so that if with every organization you've got turnover, and what we've seen a couple times is that the person responsible ended up leaving, and so now you have to retrain. So I think it's important to
Right.
cross train, get somebody else, get multiple people that know how to do it, but really rely on 1 or 2. But that way, if somebody does leave, you can turn it over to somebody else
Mhm.
and kind of let them continue with the process.
Because that also has to be a security issue, right? If too many people have access.
Yeah, and I think it allows for more error opportunity. You know, if you've got different user groups, so for example, you may have soccer and you may have football and you may have lacrosse and you have these different user groups out there. Well, one person may have gotten an updated schedule and the other person hasn't. And so if they start putting the mowers out there when you've got users, obviously it creates conflict. So we just want to make sure that the people that are the most informed, that are the most educated on what's happening, what kind of activities are going on, are the ones really scheduling those mowers because again we don't want to disrupt a user group with all of a sudden you got a mower going through the middle of a field. So we want to make sure that the staff is well versed in what activities are going on and any changes that have been made, because that is something that we did run into, and I kind of touched on it briefly. Is we started getting alerts one day. Well, all of a sudden there was a user group out there that we didn't have on the schedule. They'd gone out there on their own accord and was using the space without coordinating with us. So it
Right.
allowed us to have a conversation about making sure that we were on the same page with scheduling, because obviously we want to provide a higher level product for them, higher level turf care, but we also don't want to disrupt kind of what they're doing. So again, well, you want people that are well informed, because especially if you're scheduling around athletic activities.
Hmm. Just to circle back to training a little bit, what type of training is required for staff to operate and maintain the systems?
It's very user friendly. And so, like with a lot of these manufacturers, they will actually come out and do the install. So they have to set the base station, which is kind of the geolocator for those robots. And then they'll come in and kind of help walk through the basics. If there's a perimeter fence, they'll kind of walk it, make sure that it's doing what it's supposed to, and help train staff on site. And so it's actually really user friendly. It's a lot of these new phone apps are so intuitive that it's easy for people to kind of pick it up on the fly, even if they're not well versed in technology. But I think the good thing is that the major setup pieces are done by the manufacturer on the front end. They come in, they get the site set up for you, and they teach you how to make those minor modifications instead of just, here you go, you get to do all of it. So that's been very helpful for us.
Do you think that's why your team has been able to embrace the mowers a little bit more?
I think so. I think having a partner and not knowing or not feeling like you're the only one that has to have all the answers. I think it's important to know that there is support systems through those manufacturers and other cities. We want to be a resource. So if there's other facility operators or cities, municipalities, whatever it is, that aren't sure, give us a call. I mean, we'd be happy to tell the good, the bad, the ugly, be able to kind of walk through the challenges. But for the most part, they've been fairly minimal. I mean, it's been a lot more pros than it's been cons at this point.
Right. Do you ever miss mowing?
Obviously, there's a therapeutic to just going out and mowing. But I think one thing, and I didn't really touch on it, is we actually are able to do this for, I would say, cheaper. A lot of these autonomous mowers are significantly cheaper than your standard mowers. The landscape mowers that we're purchasing are generally running about $100,000. We were able to buy 5 of these bigger autonomous mowers for less than that. So then you also don't have the fuel costs, you don't have the staff time. So for us, it's a value add. Being able to add more to your fleet at a lower cost, to us has been very, very helpful.
When you have to maintain the parts of the mower, is it similar to a traditional, like cost-wise, is it similar to a traditional mower, or is it cheaper because it's smaller?
I think I mean, you have to buy the razor blades, so you're buying a few of those instead of traditional blades. But again, it's a lot easier. You just flip it over, you unscrew a couple bolts, the new blades
Mhm.
on, and you're off to the races again. So I think you don't have to do like with real mowers, you're having to backlap and things like that. It's just replacing those little blades and away you go. So I think there is some maintenance efficiencies as well. So obviously, the upfront cost is a lot cheaper. You don't have to pay for the gas. Obviously, you got electricity costs, but you're not spending as much as you would be in gas. And then obviously the staff time as well. So we see some really strong efficiencies, that again allow us to go do the things that staff really wants to do, the projects that they want to do, and the improvements that they want to see instead of just being out on a mower all day.
Mhm. What are you hoping to use robotics for in the future besides just mowing?
I think it all depends on what technologies emerge. I think the thing that we're looking at right now are there are some aerial drones that are starting to come on the market that allow you to do fertilizer and chemical applications. That's something that we're seriously looking at. We use a traditional tractor and boom spray rigs. And so these new aerial drones are, from what we can see, much more efficient and honestly faster. And so we're looking at ways that, again, we can look at what technologies are coming and see how it can benefit staff. Um, we don't want this to be us going in and reducing staff. We want this to be a force multiplier. We want this to be something that staff can say, yeah, I love this because now I get to go do this instead. So we see some of these emerging technologies, whether it's these aerial drones, whether it's the drones that show the stress spots before you can actually visually see them. Those are things we're looking at as well. So we're just always looking at technologies that are emerging. We don't know exactly what those could be because obviously the technology space is growing and changing so fast. I think that's why it's important for our staff to go to different trade shows, to different conferences, what is coming out, and then trying to figure out ways that we can incorporate that to make our system better.
Right. And I'm sure that all this innovative technology or emerging technologies, it's also easier on the body and keeps people in the workforce a little bit longer because maintenance is a hard field. It's hard on the body.
It's hard on the body, and I think the other thing we see is it's harder and harder to find employees that want to do that type of work. We are constantly fighting the battle of trying to find new employees, especially working for a city. Cities don't always pay the highest pay, and so we're competing with groups around town that pay more money. And so, how do we find a workforce that can continue to make our spaces great? Part of it is technologies, part of it is some specialization with the people that we're hiring. So if we know that we're not having to mow, then maybe we can hire somebody that really is good at fixing buildings, or really good at fixing irrigation, and a little bit more specialized in terms of those areas of maintenance. So again, we think this is a great thing. It can be a little intimidating if you've never considered it, but I would say start small. That's at the end of the day, that's kind of what we did, and you just grow it based off of your organization. Don't go full send if you don't feel like it's something that you can support or that you're comfortable with. I would start small, try it. If it works, take the next step. Um, and then you end up with us with a whole bunch of mowers and some field striders and obviously looking at some aerial drones as well. So, yeah.
I don't know, you seem happy. So I feel like it's working out well.
Yeah, I mean, we're excited. I think, like I said, I think the new emerging stuff, we're really excited about those aerial drones with the fertilizer and the spreaders. The chemical application side, it allows us to, again, be more efficient. It allows us to go use staff in other ways and, again, provide a better product. I think we're tasked to be good stewards. And I think for us, this is part of stewardship. If we can do it better, more efficiently, then that's what we want to do. And so we think that these technologies are a way that we can do that and really provide a better product for our community.
Well, that's really nice to hear. But Michael, that's all I have for you today. Is there anything else you would like to add?
No, I would just say, if people are considering this and they have questions, we'd be happy to answer it. If you want to come down and see them, we'd be happy to show you how our system operates. We just want to be a resource. At the end of the day, we all are dealing with staffing issues, facility challenges. We're all in the same boat. And so if we can provide a resource for other people, or if they have questions, we'd be happy to have a conversation and see if what we're doing will work for them as well.
All right. Perfect. I'll make sure to leave your information in the show notes so that people can reach out to you. But thank you so much, Michael. I appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me on.
Thank you for listening to the Facilities in Focus podcast. Facilities in Focus is a product of the facility market, which houses FacilitiesNet, building operating management, facilities maintenance decisions, and healthcare facilities today. Thank you to our sound and video editor, Paul Ellertson. Thank you to Morgan Johnson for designing our logo. Thank you to Dan Welton, Dave Lubach, Dan Hounsell, Jeff Warden, Jill McDermott, and everyone else at Trade Press Media Group. For comments, or if you are interested in being a guest on Facilities in Focus, please email us at fnpodcast@tradepress.com.